I'm curious to know, like, what are some of the things, like, when you switch to focusing on metabolic health, what are some things that you saw different in your practice or maybe with your patients?
Yeah, it's been I don't know if you heard this stat, but the suicide rate for doctors is in the 400 per year range.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're talking about a million patients that will not have a doctor because of burnout, overworked, and not feeling that they're valued in the world. So that's just it's a remarkable stat. So part of that is also if we have a sense that we are adding value to the world, right? So if I was the old version of Dr. Tony, I was just like any other doctor. When you mentioned that you actually take people off medicine, we call it deprescribing. Um, that's something that never really happened in my, previous life. So I had done an estimation in my mind that I may have taken, maybe a couple of people off medicine in the first like 19 years of my doctor journey. Uh,
Wow.
and since focusing on metabolic health and obesity and lifestyle, we take people off medicines almost every day. So
Mm,
it's so remarkable. So the first thing that happened is that my ability to feel like a healer was, I actually became a healer, and
right,
people
right.
and people come in that office and they think they talking to Obama or Jesus or somebody, and I'm neither either one of those two things. Trust me, and that's because they've heard stories of healing. They may have heard one of those YouTube videos or podcasts and or a friend or a family member, and you restore hope. So I became a healer. I restore hope, and I had to learn to deprescribe. In fact, the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, I chair their outreach committee. um, they actually have on their website uh, therapeutic guidelines for carb restriction. So when you start, if you tell a diabetic don't eat, like, maybe the potato that may in their particular case raise their sugar, they may find that their medicine is too strong. So you have to learn how
Mm,
to wean them off in a safe fashion. So there's guidelines that we have to give clinicians who don't have the extra education guidance on what to do so their patients don't end up in the ER with hypoglycemia or low sugar. So yeah, so the difference is, oh, I don't want to take that extra medicine because of the side effects, to, are you sure I can stop this medicine, doctor? Even when you get to the point where they've healed, they still, kind of are not accustomed to being told you don't have to take that blood pressure pill anymore. So
hmm.
it's been so I feel, so if I have just one person out of 25 patients, it makes my whole day feel completely different. So, but it tends to be more than that.
That's man, that's I can't even imagine what that shift is like. I've had so many doctors, nurses, just people in the medical field talk about how depressing it is, how they feel like they're not really helping people, and it becomes very stressful. I think that's why that stat that you told me is so significant. I did not know that, but I can imagine the amount of stress, and especially if somebody gets, most people that I talk to, when I ask them, "Hey, why did you become a doctor?" It pretty much boils down to help people, right?
Hmm.
That's pretty. No one's like, "Oh, I wanted to drive a BMW and I wanted to, live in a $500,000 house," and it's like I wanted to help people. And when you're out there doing the work and you're seeing more people getting hurt or dying than you're able to help, I think it does something to somebody with a heart like that. But I'm curious to know, um, we've talked about these lifestyle changes. You touched on it a little bit. Let's dive deeper. What are some of the lifestyle changes that you would, uh, you know, offer to people? Or, I mean, I don't know if it's disease based or you kind of how you approach it, but if you could talk more about that.
Yeah, I think the goal is to again go back to meet people where they are. So the first thing I do is I say, let's figure out what the goal is, and once they express their goal, I use the SMART acronym. I like acronyms. And with the SMART acronym, it's got to be specific. It can't be weight loss. It's got to be how many pounds. It's got to be measurable. We can obviously
Gotcha.
measure the weight. Can you achieve it? A couple of pounds a week, whatever we decide. Is it relevant to your life? And put a time on it. So the first thing is to get a feel for, what is it that they're trying to achieve. And then I make sure that they're ready to achieve it. And I have to resist myself from trying to push too much on people. So I make sure they're motivated. I try to be empathetic, and I try to empower them. Now, once I'm at that point, what I do is I focus on, nutrition's always number one. So I tend to think in terms of, and I know you do the same. I say, let's focus on less sugar, less processed food. And then depending on what they're, I even think seed oils can be a little challenging, because when you take a seed and process it and turn it into, an oil, that can be inflammatory.
Mm.
And then I look at, if they're not on any type of dietary pattern, I may push them. I lean towards low carb, because so many of the metabolic conditions do really well with that. If I have a patient in front of me who's more plant-based, I then say, can we try more of a lower carb version of that, which is challenging. I think what makes it easier, if they're willing to do eggs, that makes it, sometimes if they can do some certain yogurts, the dairy yogurts, not most dairies, but so what I do is I look at where they are and try to work with them. So I have more patients who are more low carb focused, but I have vegans, I have carnivores. And what I do is I try to support them. And then so once I'm done with the nutrition, I definitely mention intermittent fasting, obviously, because that's a no-brainer. It's probably the fastest way to heal. And then we talk about the nest, the exercise, the less stress, the sleep, the how we think, because people have these less self-limiting thinkings that will inhibit them. If they've had trauma, we have a trauma recovery center within our system. And then I have a ROPE acronym that focuses on their relationships, avoiding organisms and pollutants that may harm them. And then the E is for protecting our emotions and making sure our life experiences serve us. And that's really important, because the life experience of some cultures is you got to eat cornbread with your greens. The life experiences of some cultures, you have to have pita bread with everything. The life experiences where, so what I try to do is say, if you're a diabetic, let's put the meter in front of you. So you eat something, let's see what happens an hour later. If you find that there are certain foods that you eat that are raising your blood sugar, which can then lead to hyperinsulinemia and metabolic syndrome, let's avoid those foods and then eat the foods that don't do that. The good news is, when you become more metabolically healthy, there's a little bit more tolerance to certain things, right? So in that scenario, you may have a person who's doing a low carb diet at 50 carbs a day, let's just give an example. They may find themselves, because they're exercising, because they've learned to manage stress, because they're getting enough sleep, I can tolerate 75 or 100 now. So it's all about meeting people where they are, giving them options, things that can replace, like a rice versus cauliflower rice. And then and that's kind of how I approach it. I think we have to be flexible and use bio-individuality, where each individual is given a slightly different approach. Right? That's why coaching is so important. That'll suit their particular needs. And if we do that, then we'll convince more people that this is the right path.